The invitation. I remember the day I received the envelope like it was yesterday. The paper was thick and yellowed slightly at the edges. The handwriting was familiar, looping, and elegant. It was from Lillian, my best friend, the girl who had shared my secrets, my laughter, my first tears. She was getting married. I sat in my small apartment in New York, a city that never slept, and I felt my heart pause. The 1980s were bright in neon and music in the streets, and I had grown with them, watching life move in fast colors. I unfolded the invitation slowly, the white lace trim soft under my fingers, and for a moment I felt like a girl again, 16, 17, with dreams bigger than the skyline. The invitation said the wedding would be in the small church where we had played as children. The same church where we had run through the rain laughing and whispering about boys and the future. I remembered our plans. We had promised each other that no matter where life took us, we would be there for each other always. We had talked of weddings and dresses and first loves in whispers under streetlights and in the quiet of bedrooms that smelled of perfume and hope. Now Lillian was marrying someone else, and I was to witness it. I felt a strange mix of joy and heaviness. Joy because she deserved happiness, she always had the brightest heart. Heaviness because in the quiet of my own room I remembered the dresses I had bought, the promises I had whispered to myself, and the love I had lost along the way. I went to the closet and pulled out the dress I had chosen 10 years ago for my own wedding. It had hung there untouched. The silk shimmered softly in the light from the window. I had never worn it. Life had taken me elsewhere, but now it felt alive again. The fabric carried memories of laughter and sorrow, hope and disappointment. It waited for me to decide what it would be now. I sat on the edge of my bed and ran my fingers over the lace. I remembered Lillian and I getting ready for dances. I remembered the street fays, the neon lights, the music spilling out of cars. I remembered dreaming of men who would love me endlessly and a life that felt permanent. I remembered the night I cried into my pillow because reality was heavier than dreams. I remembered walking past the river and thinking the water carried my secrets better than anyone could. Now I held a dress that represented all of that. It waited quietly in the room. I wondered if I would ever put it on. If I could face the past and walk into a celebration of someone else's love wearing the shadow of my own lost chances. I wondered if Lillian would look at me and see the girl she had once known, or if she would only see a woman who had lingered too long in the corridors of memory. I decided I would go. I had to. I owed her that much. And I owed myself the chance to walk through the streets of our childhood one more time, to feel the laughter and light of the 1980s that had made us who we were. I began packing. Not just the dress, but memories. I packed my hairbrush from the days we had spent styling each other's hair. I packed letters we had written in secret, hiding them from parents and boys. I packed the small notebook I had written poetry in that no one had ever read. The train would take me to the town where we had grown up. I could almost hear the engine's whistle like it was calling my name. I could almost see the streets lined with the colors of our youth. I could almost taste the excitement of being part of something I had always imagined from afar. I looked at the dress one last time before folding it carefully. It was not a wedding for me. It was not a dress for me. And yet it carried a weight of 10 years that only I could feel. I took a deep breath and whispered into the room that had held me for so long. I am coming. And the dress waits for me, gently as it carried me toward the town where we had grown up. The landscape blurred into green and gold like a painting. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. The 1980s had been loud and bright with music on the radios. Cassette tapes spinning songs about love, heartbreak, and hope. Neon signs flickering outside diners where we had sat drinking soda and dreaming. I remembered Lillian and I sneaking out to watch the city lights from rooftops. Our laughter echoing into the night as if the world itself had paused to listen. I remembered dresses we had tried on in department store windows, the fabric shimmering under fluorescent lights as we twirled and imagined our futures. Boys would smile shyly as we passed, and we would giggle hiding behind our hair. We believed we were invincible and nothing could hurt us. I thought of the boys I had loved. The first kiss stolen behind the bleachers. The hands that held mine and let go too soon. I remembered feeling my heart break quietly in the dark. I remembered writing letters that were never sent and dreams that were quietly folded into drawers. I remembered thinking that life was waiting somewhere just beyond the horizon. But life had moved differently, and I had followed a path that led me far from the streets of my youth. Now I was returning, and everything looked smaller and brighter at the same time. The church where we had played as children was still there. Its white walls gleamed in the afternoon sun. The bell tower rose into the sky unchanged. It was a reminder that some things remain even as we grow older. I reached into my bag and touched the dress. Its silk was cool against my fingers. I remembered the day I had bought it. I had imagined myself walking down the aisle wearing it. I had imagined James waiting for me at the altar. I had imagined a life that never came to be. And now I was bringing it with me, not for me but for Lillian. To honor her day and to honor the girl I once was. I thought of our childhood games. Of racing through fields and stealing peaches from neighbors' trees. Of promises whispered under the shade of old oak trees. Of dreams shared in the quiet of bedrooms. Of secrets and first loves. Of letters we had burned in the fireplace so no one could read them. Of laughter that made our hearts sore. I remembered the nights I had cried alone. The nights I had wondered if I had made the right choices. If love had chosen me or if I had let it slip away. And I realized that this journey to Lillian's wedding was also a journey to myself. A chance to walk through the streets of my past and remember who I had been before the world told me who to be. The train slowed as it entered the station. I stepped onto the platform feeling the 1980s air wrap around me. It smelled of rain and asphalt and the faint sweetness of flowers. I walked past the familiar shops, the corner diner where we had eaten fries, and the bakery that had smelled of sugar and bread. Everything was smaller and simpler but carried the weight of memory. It was a town that had held us, that had seen our laughter and our tears, that had waited for us even as we left. I carried the dress carefully through the streets. People glanced at me smiling, politely unaware of the stories I carried in the folds of silk. I felt Lillian's presence with me, her laughter in my ears, her hand brushing mine as we had run through the rain all those years ago. And I felt the dress shift in my hands as if it recognized me too, as if it had been waiting for this day all along. I reached the house where the wedding preparations were underway. The smell of flowers filled the air. The rooms were alive with excitement. Bridesmaids laughed as they pinned ribbons in hair and adjusted dresses. The kitchen hummed with the warmth of family. Everything was vibrant and chaotic and beautiful. I stepped inside and felt a strange combination of nostalgia and anticipation. The 1980s music played softly in the background. Vinyl records spinning songs that reminded me of dances and stolen kisses and nights under the stars. I walked to Lillian and hugged her tightly. Her eyes sparkled with happiness. And for a moment I felt the girl I had been alongside her. The girl who believed in forever and never knew how heavy life could be. I placed the dress gently in her hands. It was not mine to wear, but it carried my history, my heart, my memories. And she understood that without a word. She smiled at me and whispered, "Thank you for bringing this with you." I realized then that weddings are not just about love between two people. They are about the people who stand beside them, the memories they carry, the stories that have led them here. And I understood that in some ways, this day was also about me. I stepped back and watched the preparations continue. The laughter, the music, the flowers. I felt the 1980s around me in every note of a song, in every shine of a vinyl record, in every flicker of light. And I knew that this wedding would mark not just Lillian's new life, but the closing of a chapter of my own. A chapter filled with dreams, with love, with choices that had shaped me. And as I touched the dress one last time before setting it aside, I whispered to myself, I am ready. The arrival. The town looked smaller than I remembered. The streets curved like ribbons between brick houses. Neon signs from the corner diner flickered faintly as if waving a welcome. The air smelled of rain and asphalt and the faint sweetness of flowers from the church gardens. I stepped off the train carrying my bag and the dress. It felt heavier than I expected, as if it held not just silk and lace but years of memories and quiet longing. I walked toward the house where everyone had gathered. Laughter spilled from the open windows. Music played softly from a stereo. Bridesmaids hurried past carrying ribbons and flowers. The chaos was alive and warm, and I felt like an intruder and a participant all at once. Lillian ran to me before I could reach the door. Her eyes shone brighter than I remembered. We embraced, and I felt the pulse of the 1980s in her hug, in the smells, in the laughter. She whispered how glad she was I came. And for a moment I was 16 again, running through the streets with her hand in mine. People greeted me with smiles and curiosity. Old neighbors who remembered our childhood. Family members who had watched us grow. and strangers who didn't know the history but felt the energy of the day. I could see the love in the room. The music vinyl record spinning songs of romance and friendship filling every corner. And yet I could not escape the shadows in my heart. The memories of dresses I had bought and never worn, the kisses I had given and never received, the nights I had hoped for a life that had not arrived. I stepped into the room where the wedding preparations were in full swing. The mirrors reflected bridesmaids adjusting each other's hair. The scent of flowers and perfume mingled with the warmth of sunlight spilling through windows. And I felt the weight of the dress again. The dress that waited 10 years, that carried my dreams and my loss. It rested in my hands as I placed it carefully on a chair. I could feel the silk humming with anticipation, like it knew it had a story to tell. I moved through the rooms meeting old friends. Some looked older and some the same. Some eyes held recognition and warmth. Others carried surprise and curiosity. It felt like walking through the pages of a diary I had forgotten I had written. Each face a sentence, each smile a paragraph. And I realized how much life had changed yet stayed the same. The sound of laughter drew me to the garden. Children ran around chasing each other. Adults held drinks and whispered in small clusters. The sun bounced off the petals of flowers decorating the fences. And I saw him. Not James, not the love I had lost, but someone from my past, someone who remembered me in a way that no one else did. He smiled as our eyes met, and I felt a spark of memory lighting the corridors of my heart. I wondered if he remembered the nights we had shared stories or the dreams we had whispered under the moonlight. And for a moment I imagined what it would be like to tell him all the things I had never said. But the day was not mine. It was Lillian's, and I stepped back, letting the space around her fill with love and joy. I watched her laughter spread like sunlight across the garden. I watched the bridesmaids arrange flowers and adjust veils and smooth the hems of dresses. I watched the music play and the conversations flow, and felt the pulse of life in the town in the 1980s in every note and color. I touched the dress again. It was not mine to wear. It was a reminder of the past, a keeper of memories. I set it aside in the room where the bridesmaids would prepare, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. The day had just begun, and I knew that even though the dress was not mine, the story it carried was part of me, and that in watching Lillian step into her own life, I was stepping closer to understanding mine. The sun dipped slightly in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden. I walked among the guests, feeling the energy, the warmth, the history of the town and the decade. And I realized that arriving was only the beginning. The wedding would unfold like a storybook, and I would be both a reader and a character. I could feel the twists, the whispers, the laughter, the tears waiting just ahead. And I was ready to witness it all. I breathed in the 1980s air once more. The music, the flowers, the voices, the light. I smiled, knowing that every step I had taken to get here, every choice, every heartbreak, had led me to this moment. And as I adjusted my dress for the first time in 10 years, I whispered quietly to myself, "This is where I belong." The room was quiet compared to the laughter and music outside. I stood before the mirror, holding the dress in my hands. The silk shimmered under the soft light, and the lace whispered memories I had almost forgotten. 10 years it had waited. 10 years of longing, of hope, of dreams that never arrived. And now it was here, with me, on the day of Lillian's wedding. I slipped it over my shoulders. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Not for a wedding of my own, but for me, for the woman I had become. The reflection staring back at me was someone I recognized, and someone I had been searching for all these years. I remembered the night I had first bought it. I had imagined James waiting at the altar. I had imagined love that would last forever. I had imagined a life that never came to be. Now I realized that the dress did not hold disappointment, it held growth. It held courage. It held every quiet choice that had led me to this room, to this moment in the 1980s, where the world was bright and chaotic and full of possibility. I heard footsteps. It was Lillian. Her eyes widened as she saw me. "You look beautiful," she said softly. I smiled. "It is your day," I whispered. But she shook her head. "No," she said. "It is your moment too. You wore this for yourself, even if it waited for me." The bridesmaids gasped softly. Some whispered. They had never seen a dress move like this. I could feel the fabric molding around me like a second skin. I could feel the past brushing against my shoulders. I could feel the laughter, the music, the heartbreak, the dreams of my 20s woven into every stitch. I walked slowly to the window. The sun fell across the room, illuminating the dress and me. The music from outside drifted in, and for a moment I closed my eyes and let the memories carry me. The boys I had loved, the dances I had attended, the letters I had written, the nights I had cried into my pillow. All of it was here in the shimmer of silk, the whisper of lace, the weight of a dress that had waited 10 years. I felt a presence. Someone had entered the room quietly. It was Michael. He had been a friend in my youth, someone I had trusted, someone who had seen me before the heartbreaks, before the losses, before the quiet nights alone. He smiled. "The dress looks like it was meant for you." I nodded. "I think," he said, "it waited for you to be ready. Not for the wedding you imagined, but for the woman you became." I turned and saw the other guests gathering in the doorway. They looked at me with curiosity, respect. The dress was no longer just fabric, it was a statement, a story, a journey. And I understood then that weddings were not just about love between two people. They were about the people who carried history, who had endured, who had survived, who had found themselves along the way. I walked toward the garden, the dress flowing behind me like a river of memories. I could hear the laughter, the music, the excitement. But inside I felt calm and strong. The twists of my 20s, the choices, the heartbreaks, the love lost. It all led me here. To this dress. To this day. To this moment where I could finally claim my story. Lillian found me at the edge of the garden. She took my hand. "You look radiant," she said. "Not for me," I whispered. "For the girl I was, for the woman I am." She squeezed my hand and smiled. "Sometimes the past catches up with us," she said, "but only to remind us how far we have come." And I smiled, because I finally understood. The dress had never been about the wedding, it had been about me. And in wearing it now, I had finally embraced every year, every memory, every quiet tear, every moment of hope and despair. I had finally stepped into the woman I had always been waiting to become. The 1980s air surrounded us in the garden. Music and laughter danced across the petals of flowers. The sun glinted off the dress, and I felt a warmth in my chest. Not of regret, not of longing, but of understanding and quiet triumph. I had arrived, not at a wedding for love, but at a wedding for myself. The celebration. The church bells rang and the sun dipped low in the sky. The town glowed in warm shades of gold and orange. The guests moved through the streets carrying laughter and music like a tide. I walked alongside Lillian, feeling the energy of the 1980s in every note of the stereo and every shimmer of light. The dress flowed around me, whispering memories with every step. I realized the celebration was bigger than the couple, it was bigger than the vows, it was a gathering of all the lives and choices that had led us here. The ceremony began. Lillian glided down the aisle smiling. Her groom waited nervously, his hands trembling. I stood at the side, feeling the dress wrap around me like a shield and a comfort. The flowers smelled of roses and lilies and something else I could not name. The music swelled, and the officiant spoke words of love and promise. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the memories carry me back to our youth, the 1980s nights full of neon and music and dreams too big to fit into reality. After the vows, the celebration moved to the garden. Tables lined with white cloths and candles. Children ran laughing through the flower beds. Adults sipped soda and wine and told stories of past weddings and secret crushes. I watched Lillian dance with her father. I watched friends lift glasses and tell jokes and laugh. And I felt a quiet warmth in my chest. The dress had waited 10 years to carry me here. Not to the altar, but to a place of understanding and peace. Then something unexpected happened. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Michael from the past. He smiled and said quietly, "There is someone you should see." He led me to a small alcove behind the garden where the light fell in soft streaks. There sat a man I had known long ago, someone I had loved and lost in the whirlwind of our 20s. He rose slowly as I approached. "Ileana," he said, "I never expected to see you again." I felt my heart catch and release all at once. It was as if time had folded back on itself. The 1980s air carried a weight of memories and unspoken words. We spoke quietly, about the years gone by, about choices we had made and roads we had taken, about the loves we had lost and found and the lives we had built. He looked at me and said, "I always remembered you." I smiled softly and said, "The dress waited for me too." He nodded understanding, and for a moment the past and present collided in a single heartbeat. The music, the laughter, the flowers, the air. all of it alive and full of emotion and possibility. I returned to the party. Lillian caught my eye and smiled knowingly. The celebration swirled around me in colors and sounds and scents. The neon of the 1980s flashing in the memories of our youth. The cake was cut. Glasses raised. Dances began and ended in laughter and spinning. I felt every emotion rising and falling within me. Joy for Lillian for the life she was beginning. A quiet sorrow for the life I had imagined. And an unexpected thrill of what might still come. The twist of the evening came when an old letter was found in the church attic. A note written in my handwriting from the years I had spent dreaming of love and weddings. Lillian held it up. She laughed softly. "You wrote this," she said. I nodded. Yes, it was my heart on paper. A reminder of the girl I had been and the woman I had become. The guests were curious. Some laughed, some nodded. Some wiped a quiet tear from their eye. And I realized then that the celebration was not just for Lillian, it was for everyone whose life had intersected with hers. For everyone whose past had shaped the present. I danced later in the evening with Michael. The music of the 1980s spinning around us. I felt the dress move with every step, a reminder of 10 years of waiting, of hope, of growth. The guests cheered. The lights flickered. The night carried us through laughter and whispered conversations and memories shared. And as the moon rose over the town, I stepped outside for a moment. The air smelled of flowers and rain and possibility. I looked at the dress one last time. It had done its work. It had carried me through the past to the present. It had shown me that even waiting for 10 years could lead to a moment of joy and discovery. The 1980s night stretched endlessly before me. And I understood that celebration was not just about the wedding, it was about life and choices and the courage to face them. I smiled quietly, knowing that in the midst of laughter, music, and dancing, I had found a piece of myself I had lost. And perhaps the story was not over. Perhaps there were still chapters to be written. But tonight the celebration was ours, all of ours. The night of reflection. The party had quieted. The music faded into soft echoes. Guests had drifted home or to small conversations under the garden lights. I stayed behind in the shadows of the flowers. The air smelled of roses and damp earth. The 1980s night carried the distant hum of cars and laughter from the streets. And I felt the dress around me like a memory I could hold. I sat on the steps of the old church, looking at the stars blinking slowly above. The glow from lanterns cast soft light across the stone. I thought of Lillian, of her laughter, of her joy, and I felt happiness rise quietly within me. Not for the wedding alone, but for everything the night had reminded me of friendship, of youth, of the courage to carry on. Michael appeared silently. He handed me a small drink. No words needed. We sat together in quiet reflection. The city sounds faded, and I felt the past and present merge. The 1980s felt alive around us. The neon signs, the music, the memories, all of it breathing in the space between us. I thought of the dress. 10 years it had waited. 10 years of dreams tucked away. And now it rested softly around me. I realized it had never been about wearing it for someone else. It had been about stepping into myself, about remembering, about honoring the years I had lived and the woman I had become. I watched the moonlight touch the petals of flowers. I remembered every choice I had made, the heartbreaks, the nights of tears and longing, the letters unsent, the dances attended and the ones missed. And I understood that life is not measured only by the moments of joy or sorrow, but by how we carry them, by how we hold the stories of our own hearts. Michael spoke softly. "You look like you finally understand." I nodded. The dress waited for me, and I waited for this moment too. We smiled quietly at each other. No promises, no expectations, just recognition of the years that had shaped us. I rose slowly. The night was still. The stars flickered like memories against the dark sky. I walked through the garden, past the tables and candles, past the echoes of laughter, and felt every heartbeat of my past in the folds of the dress. Every lesson, every choice, every moment waiting 10 years for me to notice. I reached the door of my old apartment later that night, carrying nothing but the dress and the quiet knowledge of myself. I laid it gently on the bed. It was not mine to give away. It was not mine to hide. It belonged to my story, to the years of waiting, to the life I had lived and the woman I had become. I sat by the window looking at the city lights. The neon glow reflected softly across the walls. I whispered into the night, "Thank you for everything." The 1980s had given me music and fashion and streets to wander. It had given me love and heartbreak and friends to cherish. It had given me a dress that waited 10 years. And in its quiet presence, I finally understood what it meant to hold my own story. The night stretched endlessly. The air was still, and I felt peace. Not the kind that ends the story, but the kind that tells you the story is yours and yours alone. And sometimes waiting 10 years is the only way to truly know yourself. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the past fold into the present. The dress shimmered softly. The memories hummed gently. And I knew that tomorrow I would rise again. Stronger, wiser, alive, and for the first time in a long time. I smiled without hesitation. The dress had waited, and now I was ready.